Okay, so this is about Lithuanistics in Europe. So this topic is not very popular somehow in Lithuania. I don't know why. Lithuanians, they do not study Lithuanian sources in European countries in spite of open borders and good communication, easy transport system. So somehow it's crazy. One of the reasons is that Lithuanian maybe potential is not very big. We do not have many scholars who could do this. And very important problem lies in languages. Lithuanians, again, somehow they're not very good in foreign languages, except the most popular like German. But German also is declining. But well, Polish, Russian. And it's about all the generation, but when we speak about young people, so it's an absolute catastrophe. It's very, for example, for me, it's very difficult to find this supposed to find young students who would continue my research. So what we got Lithuanistics a lot. So we will go through major places. But we do not have many scholars who would do these researches. So in spite of very favorable circumstances. So if you're looking to Europe, of course many things are unresearched, but still what they know and what they heard about. So if we start from Georgia, in Georgia we got very good Lithuanian friends. And they already started studies of Lithuanian-Georgian relations in Tbilisi. They're writing articles, and they would be very happy to find some friends here in Lithuania to continue these researches, but there's no one. And of course, I never heard that any Lithuanian historian knows Georgian language. As well as these Georgian guys, they do not know Lithuanian language, so but maybe there could be some to establish some friendship. One will work with Georgian sources, another with Lithuanian. Maybe such a company could do something. But still, I'm signaling that this in Georgia there is at least one very interested person who is doing this research. And he's acquainted with the director of Vilnius University, so Vytautas Magnus is traveling frequently to Georgia to drink some wine together with this Lithuanian guy. But still, in Vilnius University, there are no young people who are studying these Georgian issues. So, if you want, I can get in touch with this person in Georgia. I do not know anybody in Azerbaijan, in Yerevan, in Dagestan, so I do not know people who would be interested in Chechnya, so only about Georgia. Now, if we go further, of course, there is a very serious Klondike here, a very important place in Ukraine. Before the war, they were extremely interested in establishing contacts with Lithuanians, and Vytautas Jankauskas now in university, and that weird guy, but he was a person who kept very intensive contacts with local scholars here in Western Ukraine, and they had a lot of conferences, a lot of meetings annually, several times per year. And actually in Western Ukraine, these scholars who are dealing with Lithuania, with Poland, they know him very well up till now, in spite of all the problems that he had at our university. Now he returned to university in a very unstable position, but still he got contacts with them, and you could have access to him if you want to do something in Western Ukraine when the situation stabilizes. And here's a lot of Lithuanistics, a lot of Lithuanian materials especially related to the Middle Ages, late Middle Ages, 14th century, 15th century, beginning of the 16th century. So more than 200 years you got here Lithuanian, how to say, castles, maybe not fully Lithuanian, but still castles which were very important in the times of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, like Kamenets-Podolsk, like Lutsk, the second capital of Vytautas the Great, and like Olika, it's a very, very famous palace of Radvila family. Yeah, so we had in Olika, in Nesvich, and yeah, these two were the biggest in the region, Nesvich in Belarus, and here Olika. So these castles and palaces and even cities which are directly related to the history of Grand Duchy of Lithuania were visible here in this, and local historians, they are studying them, and they are writing nice things, they're doing nice researches. For example, me myself, I found here my heroes from Switzerland. Those guys, architects who worked in Lithuania, in Vilnius, they participated in the reconstruction of the palace of the dukes in the 17th century. And after restorations here, after war here, they traveled to Ukraine and they did very interesting things in Ukraine. So you got even this artistic relations between Vilnius and Western Ukrainian lands. So there's plenty of materials and plenty of interest from their side, yeah, towards us. Ukrainians are very pro-Lithuanian since I don't know when, maybe since the last decade of the 20th century, and they're very interested in cooperating with us. But of course, the first problem that we got here is language problem. Yes, you must know Russian language, and you must have the abilities of reading Ukrainian text, and it's a complete catastrophe for Lithuanians. So there are some Lithuanians who can speak Russian and who can read, but it's a very, very big problem for them to read Ukrainian. Yes, so to jump from Russian to Ukrainian for most of Lithuanians, even those who know Russian language, is a big problem. Another problem, it's a very psychological problem for Lithuanians. They do not like Ukraine. It's from my practice. Actually, if when I have young students, young people who want to do some projects with me, usually they prefer not going there. Yes, if there's a possibility to go to Switzerland, to Germany, to Poland, they prefer going there, not to Ukraine. So I had this problem myself for a very long time, and I never succeeded in sending anybody to Ukraine. So I can send somebody in Warsaw, to Paris, to Italy, to Switzerland, but it's above my ability to send somebody to Ukraine. Simply did not want to go there. But it's a very big perspective, especially when the war ends. Yeah, I think they will open these new possibilities. On the one hand, there will be a lot of money here in this region, reconstructions, investitions. On the other hand, we could use this positive attitude of Ukrainians towards us. And this infrastructure is very good. They got these, just before the war, they constructed using European money some facilities for meetings, for joint meetings, for joint projects, and you can go just live for free as much as you want and to communicate, and so you will be given everything. So from technical and from I don't know, from scientific point of view, you can get. So it was before the war. It was a very perspective place, and after the war, I think it will remain a very, very good place to make a career. yes, in studying history of Lithuania in a broader sense, you know, not only this territory of Lithuania, but something broader, something more important, and something really, from geopolitical point of view, something very serious. So, of course, this eastern part of Ukraine is much more problematic. But still, up till Dnieper River, so up to now it's called Dnieper. This is Dnipropetrovsk, and you got here Kherson and Nikolai. So, for example, Nikolai, you know, the city that Russians tried to take after taking Kherson, they were moving to Nikolai, but they did not take it. So in Nikolai, they recently constructed were constructing the monument for Vytautas the Great. Yeah, something Vytautas the Great was very important for them just before the war, and they were inviting us to come, a group of Lithuanian historians, to come here for a conference, and they were ready to show us the monument for Vytautas the Great in Nikolai, and they got a quarter in a city called Vytautas the Great. And so very, very, very strong, and their interest in Lithuania is very big, as well as in Odessa, of course. In Odessa, they're remembering this Lithuanian period of time. So everything what is to the left, to the west from Dnieper River, is in one another way is somehow in this Lithuanian world, and the interest among historians and among common people is quite big. So it's kind of interesting. In Belarus, of course, we can jump to Belarus. In Belarus, of course, everything is Lithuanian. Okay, so they are Lithuanians, and actually in each city, in each town, in each place, you will find Lithuanians since I don't know when, and even now. And so this is a completely separate story. Okay, we can go deeper if you want one sometime in a separate lecture. But simply it was a part of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania since the 13th century, and up till belonged to the Lithuanian world after the First World War. Okay, so they were saying we are Lithuanians. Okay, these guys, especially in Western Belarus. So it's an integral part of Lithuanian history. So in this sense, everything is Lithuanian here. Okay, with Latvia, it's a bit bigger problem, but you must remember that Latvia was a part of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania since mid of the 16th century. Okay, especially integrated was this part, Latgalia region, and there are a lot of Lithuanian materials. Of course, not much studies exactly on this question, but as far as I know, so the topics that I'm dealing with they are about architecture. So Lithuanian, this 18th century architecture, Vilnius Baroque style. So architects that were working here, they also worked in Belarus and in Lithuania, in Vilnius, in Kaunas. So you can find documents here related to this architecture of the 18th century, documents of persons who were working everywhere in the region. But for example, they had their headquarters, the palaces, the houses, major centers here in Latgalia region. So this region was fully integrated into Lithuania, into Grand Duchy of Lithuania. Somehow we are forgetting this. We are not treating this region as a part of our past, neither in manuals, nor in official histories, nowhere, and somehow marginalized and neglected. But this is a very nice feature, and it's interesting that these documents in Latgalia, 16th, 17th, 18th century, in the 19th century, they used to be written in Polish language. Yeah, so you go into archives, you find Polish sources. And of course, for us, maybe it's not so complicated as German sources here on the west side of Latvia. And thematically, they are closer to us because they were the same Catholics as in Lithuania, as in Western Belarus. So it's very easy. Of course, it's a bit strange that Lithuanians they do not study Latvian history extensively. Something Latvian history, and even those periods of Latvia in history which are directly related to Lithuania, which were integrated into Lithuanian history, also they are neglected. It's a bit weird. But maybe this is the future again of Lithuanians. You know, where to move. You know, if this territory would be closed, so there's a good perspective to move to north and to study Latvia finally. Actually, not many historians in Lithuania know Latvian language and German at the same time, and Polish. So if you want to go to Latvia, you must be a polyglot, okay? So it's not an easy stuff. That's why maybe it's so complicated. Now, of course, all Scandinavian issues, they are interesting, and especially because there were these relations through the Jagiellons, through Gediminas dynasty, through Jagellų dynasty, and later through Vasa dynasty, Swedish dynasty, so the ruling dynasty. And so there were exchanges, and these representatives of the highest elite stratas of the ruling families, they were exchanging. And you can find some traces in Stockholm, in Finland, maybe somewhere here in Finland, there's a place. But in general, speaking about Scandinavians, there are not many places related to Lithuania, directly related. I had some consultations with historians who are living here and who are studying histories of both countries, of Poland, Lithuania, and of Sweden, of Scandinavian countries in general, and I asked them, what can I find Lithuanians, or which places are directly related to Lithuania, so if I travel to Scandinavia, what should I visit? And they could not point to many of them. So there's a church where, you know, somebody is related to Lithuania, buried, some towns, but it's very, very superficial. So it's not so important as of course as Belarus, as Ukraine, even as Latvia. These are somehow very, very far away from us from this point of view. Okay, now of course in Poland you have a lot of things related to Lithuania. Once I made a map of Warsaw with the palaces and other places related to Lithuanians and to Lithuania directly, and the result was the conclusion that Warsaw was built by Lithuanians. Yeah, so many palaces actually. Palaces of Radvila family today, the presidential palace in Warsaw, big palace of Sapiega family in the center of the city. The palace of Sapiega family in Warsaw is much bigger than that in Vilnius, also from the same Sapiega family. So in Warsaw they had really big complex. The oldest surviving church in Warsaw was constructed was financed by a daughter of Gediminas. In the central cathedral in Warsaw, major cathedral, in the basement, you can find this grave of the first president of Poland, who was from Samogitia, from Telšiai. And actually, the whole of Warsaw is dotted with these Lithuanian palaces. Also very important in Warsaw, you have got these two big fields where Poles and Lithuanians together were electing their rulers, kings. Yeah, Wola and Kamionek. And there are some monuments erected there. But these were places where Lithuanians, soon together with Poles, were electing their rulers. And among these elected rulers, through the 17th and 18th century, there were 2 or 3 Lithuanians, and the last Poniatowski was from Lithuania. So we were electing our rulers in Warsaw, and it was kind of capital, one of Lithuanian capitals. Yeah, but somehow, again, from this, well, not looking at Warsaw from this perspective, from the perspective of objects. Of course, what Lithuanians do, scholars, historians, they go to Warsaw to work in the archives and the libraries and to go to the bookstores. If you go to any bookstore, any academic bookstore in Warsaw, you'll find more books on the history of Lithuania than in a Lithuanian bookstore. Okay, and it will be sometimes very crazy once very Poland-centric, but still it's about history of Lithuania. And of course, if you go to Krakow, in public places, there are a lot of nice Lithuanian quarter farms, as well as in Warsaw. So sometimes it seems to me that in Warsaw and Krakow you will find more Poland, more Lithuanianized villages than in Vilnius or Poland itself. So they are very, from this point of view, Lithuanized cities. And of course, archives and libraries and bookstores full of Lithuanian materials. And there are professionals in these 2 cities who speak Lithuanian, historians, and who are ready to accept, to communicate with Lithuania. They are asking Lithuanians to be involved in different projects, writing to me, calling, asking some students, some contacts. They always got some ideas, but again, Lithuanians do not want. I don't know why, but one of the reasons, of course, that we lack potential. So we do not have many historians, professional historians, and those whom we have, they do not have time because so many works and so many activities. Most of us are engaged. That simply we do not have time even to communicate with these Polish colleagues. And a lot of joint Polish-Lithuanian projects failed for the last 30 years, and the reason usually used to be lack of initiative, lack of work, lack of wish to work from the Lithuanian side. So Polish colleagues always complaining to me that these Lithuanians, we want to work with them, we can give them money, but they do not want to do anything. So Warsaw, Krakow, Wrocław, Poznań, Gdansk, Torun, so all these cities in all of Poland were strong centers which are studying East Central Europe, which are interested in communicating with Sejny. So Poland is fully dotted, and it's an immense amount of Lithuanistics. But the result is that up till now we do not have history of Poland written by the Lithuanian historian. We do not have in general this analysis of its relations, good analysis, fundamental researches. And in general, not many people who are seriously working with Poland. Okay, now if we go further, I think that one of the most interesting directions on the most perspective. So when you are young people, you can think about that. I think that it's a very good place to make a career. Is this region? Yeah, we can draw. It's so actually nobody seriously investigated relations between this region and Lithuania, because on the one hand it's Hansa cities. So all this period of Hansa cities at the end of Middle Ages, when Hansa dominated in the Baltic Sea and they traded with Lithuania, they had their offices in Lithuania. And the most important is that these people from the Saxony, they were migrating to Lithuania for several hundred years. And this migration is not normally studied. Well, all our city dwellers were from northern Germany, from Saxony. So why not to study which cities they were coming from? Why they were coming? What they left in northern Germany? So what were these relations? And it's interesting that this Hansa, all this Hansa phenomenon, is directly related to Netherlands, to Amsterdam phenomenon. This one is 16th, 17th century, so a bit later. But Hansa was replaced by Dutch in the Baltic Sea through the 16th and 17th century. So these Dutch people, they were traveling and they were trading with Lithuania and all these grains, all this stuff from forest. It was carried with the ships, to Netherlands and resold here to European markets. So it was from economic point of view, from the point of view of migration, of trade. It's very interesting. It's very interesting region for Lithuanian history, but nobody studied it seriously. Nobody. Happening work by a Lithuanian historian, bigger or smaller, especially bigger one, who would deal with these problems. And also we should add here religion, because these guys were Protestants, Lutherans. Yes, so they had relations for the 16th, 17th century with their, so they migrated to Lithuania. They were Lutherans here, but they were keeping relations with Germany, northern Germany, for ages. And also these guys in the Netherlands, they were Protestants. And they were communicating with Protestants in Lithuania. So we got economics, religion, yes, and then cultural. Lithuanians were going here to these universities to study, yes, especially Protestant tradition, but no serious studies of this, of all these phenomena. And this region today is one of the richest in the world. Yes, so it would be not so difficult to find grants and to make a career in studying these things. But the only thing that you should know is just German language, because it's kind of classical German language, which is much easier than southern Germany, where you've got dialects. Okay, so this is very interesting, very perspective, and I think it's one of the future topics. Yes, for those who want to go out from Lithuania, studying Lithuanian history. So it's northern Germany, Netherlands, and part of Belgium, not French Belgium, but normal Belgium. Okay, then if we go further to, of course, to Britain, it's another very good topic. In Britain, they got plenty of materials on Lithuanian past. Šedvytis once made a research on this, our colleague, and made a short research on Lithuanian sources in London. So the point was that starting from the 16th century and up to 20th century, Britain was very interested in Lithuanian issues, in the Grand Duchy of Lithuania and later in Lithuanian issues, because of many reasons, but which later, starting from the 18th century, the reasons were economic, because they dominated in the Baltic Sea, so they replaced the Dutch in the Baltic Sea, and they traded with Lithuania, even in the interwar period. So Lithuania was an important trading partner. Before the 18th century, there were some political reasons mixed with economic, but starting from 16th century, you're going to find in London big relations, very thoroughly, very detailed relations on the events in Lithuania. exactly in Lithuania, very, very detailed descriptions. And I wonder, I cannot understand why there are no Lithuanian historians who write history of English and Lithuanian relations. I think it would be very, very easy to do that, because language is very easy. It's about English language, and most of sources are already digitalized, and it would be not so difficult to write the first history of British and Lithuanian relations. So it sounds not very, very complicated. Having in mind also a very important factor of Scottish people who migrated to Lithuania since the end of 16th century, through 17th and 18th century, and who established big communities. Now there appeared synthetic books about this migration based on sources. So if you add this, if you add these official, semi-official relations of Lithuania, which can be found in London, so you could make a very interesting narration about these British people and their relations to Lithuania. The central part of Vilnius, all Kėdainiai, and some other places, Šventoji, were inhabited by these Scottish peoples for hundreds of years. And today we got big migration of Lithuanians to Britain, so such type of book, such type of study would be very actual, yes, interesting, and a good basis for future careers for anyone here, I think. Yeah. And then if we go further to Paris, to France, of course, well, so but again, problem that nobody speaks French today. It's a complete failure. It's very bad, of course. But 17th century, 18th century, very, very, intense communication between France and the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. A lot of Lithuanians were traveling to France for not for studies, but for visiting court, king's court, communicating, learning manners, buying clothes, and simply visiting Paris for tourist reasons. So it was very. And on the other hand, the French, they were traveling to Lithuania, soldiers, specialists, in artillery, for example, officers in the 17th century. There were plenty of them in Lithuania, in Poland, yes, in different periods. Intellectuals in the 18th, 19th century, even those teachers of noble children of nobility were coming from France to Lithuania in huge numbers, and architects and painters. So it's a very, very rich, very difficult, story. And again, nobody seriously worked on it. I don't know. Again, I don't know. Maybe it's a problem of language. Again, nobody wants to deal with French. I don't know why, but it's a problem. French language is a big problem. Yes, in Lithuania. There's only one topic which is studied related to France, intensively studied in Lithuania for many dozen years. It's a Napoleonic period. So everybody who knows French is studying Napoleon. And they're writing about Napoleon. They wrote everything about Napoleon, what they could. But somehow they do not deal with other topics. I don't know why. There was only one book written by the girl who worked in the embassy of France in Vilnius, a French girl who learned Lithuanian language. So he wrote a small book about Klaipėda history at the beginning of 20s, when there was a French garrison. You remember? So she went to Paris to the archives of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and gathered documents related to this short period of French garnison in Klaipėda, and it was a very interesting book. But that's all. So we do not have anything else about these Lithuanian-French relations. Except some. So yeah, there are some girls, women scholars from France and from Lithuania who studied and wrote few books on literary relations between France and Lithuanians in the oldest times. So they studied kind of texts written by authors, usually novels or poetry about each other, Lithuanians about French, French about Lithuanians. So from philological, from the point of view of literature, yeah, literary studies. But they were interested in the 16th, 17th, 18th century. The topics of Lithuania and Poland, they were, on the first pages of their newspapers. So they were really interested in what was happening in Poland, Lithuania, because they treated Poland, Lithuania as a natural ally in surrounding Germans. Germans was enemy number one for France, and they were interested in establishing ally with Poland. That's why they tried to establish their kings in Poland, Lithuania. They wanted them to be elected for the whole 17th century. But what they succeeded in having two queens of French origin on the Polish-Lithuanian throne, and these queens, they made a huge impact on the relations of both countries. It was in the 17th century. So France is interesting. Of course, Switzerland. Switzerland is even more interesting. But I worked for a very long time on Swiss-Lithuanian relations. Several books were written, a huge project on that, so I talked a lot to all of you about these relations. We're still continuing working on Switzerland. I have chosen Switzerland because of its complexity only, because it seemed to me very difficult, and that's why very interesting. I wanted to keep my languages French, German, and Italian. I was just forgetting them, and I decided to go to Switzerland just to keep them, not to forget them. Yes, and started receiving various grants, and since 20 years I'm related to, in one another way, to Switzerland, to different parts of Switzerland, and but it was just because of that, because it was interesting for me. So at first, 15 years, something ago, I wrote a short book about Swiss-Lithuanian relations till the end of 18th century, and maybe 10 years ago, or 5 years ago, several books were written together with a journalist from Austria about this Lithuanian relations up till our days. And recently with American and local scientists, we have done some research on architects who worked in Lithuania. So I'm continuing working. It's a very complicated story. Switzerland is really a very small country, but it's very mobile country. It's very, it's very complex country. There are many different cultures and somehow very energetic people who are traveling all the time. So it's a very mobile country with very huge cultural, intellectual potential. And maybe because of that, so these relations with Lithuania, they are very, very visible through all ages, starting from 15th, 16th century and ending with the 20th century, and various types of relations, starting from soldiers who were traveling from Switzerland to Lithuania at the end of Middle Ages, mercenaries, and ending with architects and artists from Italian-speaking Ticino canton, 17th, 18th century, who constructed many buildings in Lithuania and who made a very huge impact on Lithuanian architecture. Architects from German part of Switzerland who in the interwar period helped to restore Lithuania, and also they constructed many interesting things, also here in Kaunas, Kuliers. Yeah, religious issues, Calvinism, okay, and relations of Radvila family and other Lithuanian Protestants with Calvinists in Geneva, in Zurich from the 16th and 17th century. Zuckerbeckers from Grigioni and Graubünden canton, the guys who specialized in making all these sweet things and keeping coffees, making coffee and all these small coffees, cafeterias, yeah, small restaurants. They had that of them all over Europe, and for 200 years they were in Vilnius making all these sweet things for Vilnius inhabitants. The last cafeteria of these Graubünden, who spoke Greco-Romanic language, was closed during the Second World War and never restored. So it's and of course Lithuanians coming to Switzerland in various periods of time, including the two signatories of the February 16th Act, who were searching for their houses. In one of these houses we found a Lithuanian mafiosi living today, and so all these stories. But anyway, so it's a very complicated. So communication is very intense. But it's I would say that the most intense communication of Lithuania, if we speak of Lithuania and Western Europe, I think it was with Switzerland for all our history. But maybe it's only because I studied most deeply Switzerland. So nobody studied so deeply other countries in Europe. So this is the problem. Yes, we are not studying other places. At least so deeply as it was done in Switzerland. Another project of mine was with Austria. So we wrote together with an Austrian research book on Austrian-Lithuanian relations. It was published, I don't know, 5 years ago. So it was also interesting, and I made a map of Vienna, a Lithuanian Vienna, and it looked similar to Lithuanian Warsaw. There are many places in Vienna related to Lithuania, and even you can find Lithuanian Vytis in Vienna in public places in several. So it's kind of all the most important objects in Vienna and the old town in one another way are related to Lithuanian. Crazy, artistic, religious, there's political things, monuments for Lithuania. So many things starting from the Crusades, yes, when these Austrian people were coming to Lithuania to fight with Lithuanians, or monuments for these guys who fought against Lithuanians. And later the culmination was Jagiellonian and Habsburg dynastical weddings, plenty of them, so they were interchanging and traveling one to another, so very intense. And of course ending with the divisions of partitions of Lithuania and 19th century, finish of these relations, and then the kind of rebirth in the interwar period with some interesting projects. But still, Austria, in spite of the fact that it was a much bigger country, and in spite of the fact that it was related to Lithuania through the Jagiellonian and Habsburg relations, so it did not leave me the same impression as Switzerland. So Switzerland is much more condensed, it's much more filled with this, it's really something, It's kind of central Western Europe if we are speaking about these relations to Lithuania. Well, if we go further, Hungary. It's interesting with Hungary. With Budapest. So, but this story is kind of weird and sad, and that's why nobody studies it. It's about two Jagiellonian kings who ruled Hungary in the 15th and the 16th century, and they absolutely failed. It was a catastrophe for Hungarian history. You know, the last Jagiellonian king, he was heading Hungarian armies against the Ottoman Empire, and in Mohacs, this is locality Mohacs, in 1526, so his armies, his Hungarian armies, headed by this Jagiellonian king, they were absolutely destroyed, completely destroyed by the Ottomans, and Hungary as a state disappeared. It was divided between Austria and Ottoman Empire, so it was a collapse of the Hungarian state because of this Lithuanian ruler. That's why maybe nobody studies this historical relations, I don't know. Because in the 15th century there was this Jagiellonian Varnietis, related to Varna. He died at Varna. Again, he died being king of Hungary. He died in the battle again, in the battle against the Ottomans. And it's again a very sad and negative story for this. No successful Lithuanian rulers in Hungary. All of them all of them failed. And this in 1526 it was fatal failure. It's the end of Hungarian state. So I don't know who will start studying these relations with Hungary. And of course you must know Hungarian language. There are no people who know Hungarian language. When I lived in Budapest in 1990s, there was teacher of Lithuanian language in the Institute of History in Budapest. And they were learning Lithuanian. So there was a group of Hungarian historians who were learning Lithuanian. Yes, I was asking them why you learning Lithuanian. They could not answer me, so they didn't know the answer. But still, they were learning. Later, this teacher of Lithuanian language moved somewhere and so disappeared. And now they do not know Lithuanian. We do not know Hungarian. Never learned Hungarian. So then, and if you do not know Hungarian language, then it's difficult with Slovakia, with Romania, with Balkan countries, because it was the world of Hungary for a very long time. Okay, so and then you got Italy with Italy. So it's again a story without an end. When we jump into Italy, all that you must know is Italian language, and it seems very simple. Yeah, but somehow it's a problem. For the last something like 10 years, very intensively with Italian sources work. It is the palace of Lithuanian dukes in Vilnius, yes, because there are direct relations between the palace and Italy, especially artistic relations, and they did several very big projects, inviting Italian scholars and sending Lithuanian scholars to Italy, by trying to research the history of Italian-Lithuanian relations, all aspects of this history, and they wrote several. They edited, they published several books on that, and thick books, and made studies. So still there is no any synthesis written, but they went very deep in these researches, and it's quite promising, as long as we got Palace of Grand Dukes and they got money from the state and they can finance these things. So, and as long as there are really some very good researchers in Vilnius who know Italian language and contexts, and we are doing really very well. Yes, and so Florence. On the other hand, when I was living in Venice, in Florence, especially in Lugano, so in Modena, here Parma, so I spent some time, years, can be counted in years. So I saw a lot of. Actually, in each city there is an archive. In each city, and this is an archive. And you go to this archive, look at the catalogs, and you find Radvila family, Sapiega family, you find Lithuania, a lot of things related to Lithuania. And when I looked at people who watched these things, these inscriptions, who took these documents, only several times I found Lithuanian names. And usually these names, they were these interwar historians. And so and when I went to Florence, to the National Library in Florence, the second biggest library in Italy, I was the first Lithuanian who ever visited it, who came into this library. And there were plenty of materials on Radvila, on, let's say, later after me there went Banulite Ushra, who wrote here PhD dissertation on let's say, and history in Florence, so there was done some research. But still, such places as Venice, they hadn't studied. In Venice, you got these archives, library, there's plenty of Lithuanian materials, because they, first of all, they had this very strong, very rich diplomatic corpus. They had diplomats, and these diplomats used to descend to all corners of the world, including Lithuania, in the 16th, 17th century, even in the 18th century, and Venice, there's plenty of material. I wrote about that, and I mentioned even some of these documents. I used to write signatures in my articles, but nobody ever wanted to go to Venice, just to sit in their hives and to look at these documents. I do not know the reasons. I cannot imagine what reasons there can be not to want to go to Venice. Yeah. So what was you simply you can write a project and you can try 1 year, 2 years to try, and one day you will receive this money, or simply you can go here to the international office and to get this small grant for probation, how is it called, and you can go to Venice just to do a pilot research, look at these archives, and later you will receive more money, bigger grant, and you will find what you are looking for. Yes, for a bigger book. But this is a very good place, to come and to spend time. And the language, Italian language, is very easy in Venice. So it's not in south. They are really crazy. It's like in mountains. In German language is these mountains. But in north, it's more or less classical Italian language. Even in the 16th century, text can be read by a person who knows today Italian language. So, of course, in Rome you will find even more Lithuanian materials, but in Rome there is a problem that, well, they are all Catholics in Rome. You must be Catholic. Not women, of course, and you must know Latin. Yeah, Latin is required because all documents are in Latin, and of course it's a very time-consuming thing in Rome. In Rome it's much more difficult than in Venice. But of course in Rome you can stay forever in Rome if you like Rome. Then it's a good place, to study. There was Rabikauskas, who was sitting in Rome for many decades, who was publishing these documents related to Lithuania, Vatican documents related to Lithuania, and he died in Rome. while publishing these, 5 or 6 volumes like this, yeah, and this not far to the end, because the Poles, they were publishing these Vatican documents, and up to now maybe they published 40 or 60 volumes. So you can do all your life collecting and publishing. So there's something incredible. Well, okay, so it's 1 hour maybe. We went through. Okay, so maybe you want to ask